Hey guys, tonight we stumble through one of those Greek myths that starts out creative and innocent, until it veers straight into passive-aggressive chaos. You're nestled somewhere between sleep and curiosity, and here comes Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and, weirdly enough, musical experimentation. The moon is full, the cicadas are doing their nightly beatbox thing, and the olive trees rustle just enough to sound like gossip. You trudge through a fig grove on the edge of Boeotia. There she is, Athena herself, perched on a carved stone bench, staring at a bunch of hollow bird bones and reeds like they've insulted her intelligence. She's not in battle mode tonight. No spear, no helmet, no lecture on discipline. Just a goddess with a bit too much free time and a suspicious glint in her eye. You can tell this isn't going to be about war. No. Tonight, Athena's about to make art. Well, sort of. She's experimenting. Not with pottery or frescoes, too messy. Not with writing. She already ghostwrites for a few oracles. Instead, she's working with sound. She takes 2 hollow bones from a long-dead stag, ties them with sinew and blows into them. A low, reedy wail emerges. It's not beautiful, but it's not terrible either. Sort of like if a goose had feelings. You watch her squint, adjust the holes, try again. Each breath produces a different note, and slowly, something vaguely musical starts to take shape. It's hypnotic, really. Primitive and a little eerie. You wonder how many mortals would have already had their heads turned into pomegranates for interrupting this moment. But Athena's deep in it now, focused, frowning, occasionally muttering things like too sharp, or Dionysus would call this jazz. And here's your first fun fact of the night. Some historians argue that wind instruments in ancient Greece weren't widely respected. Stringed instruments were thought to be more refined. Yet, here's a goddess, of logic no less, losing herself in breath and rhythm. The sounds drift over the grove and into the darkened hills, where a few startled owls blink and flap off. Athena doesn't notice. She's caught up in it. A woman born from Zeus's forehead, now crouched on the dirt, spitting into a glorified recorder. But here's the twist. The invention is brilliant, sure. The tone, unusual. The gods are hard to impress, but you know innovation when you hear it. Athena creates the first aulos, a double-piped flute that centuries later would haunt Greek theatre and drunken symposiums alike. You can almost picture it. Soldiers marching to her rhythms, philosophers humming her tunes while staring moodily at shadows on cave walls. She's proud, for 5 minutes. Then something shifts. She catches her reflection in a polished bronze shield leaning against a tree. The music had started to make her cheeks puff out. Her eyes go wide. You see it before she says it, how ridiculous she looks. This mighty war goddess, cheeks bloated like a startled chipmunk, blowing furiously into 2 little sticks. Absolutely not, she says, and tosses the flute to the dirt, like it personally offended her lineage. And that's the thing, isn't it? Divine pride is fragile. You can found cities, win wars, and outwit titans, but if your reflection gives off possessed bagpipe vibes, it's game over. A lesser goddess might laugh. A human would have posted the bloated face on Olympus Talk with a cheeky hashtag. But Athena, she's mortified. And mortification, when paired with unlimited power, tends to manifest in weird ways. Some say the nymphs hiding nearby tried not to giggle. Others say they did giggle and were promptly turned into squirrels. Historians still argue whether this moment marks Athena's true break with the arts, or if she simply needed better PR. You crouch by the discarded flute as she storms off, her armour clanking dramatically, even though she wasn't wearing it 5 minutes ago. The reeds lie there, dejected, but still echoing faint little wheezes with the breeze. The owls return. They always do. One hops over, pecks the flute and hoots softly. You get the sense that something's not finished. And you're right, because while Athena might be done with her invention, the world isn't. Somewhere someone else will pick it up. Try it. blow into it and absolutely not learn from her mistake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. A branch snaps behind you. Not loud, just enough to break the silence. You turn. Something's moving toward the flute. It's a dry wind that curls through the fig grove now, rustling the discarded leaves and lifting bits of dust into lazy spirals. You squint into the dusk, unsure whether you're dreaming or hallucinating from the sheer weight of Greek mythological melodrama. But no, it's definitely real, or at least myth-real, because slinking out from behind a myrtle bush comes a nymph, and not the frolicking, giggly kind. This one looks like she's been people-watching for the last few hundred years and is profoundly unimpressed. She's tall, lithe, barefoot, as most magical forest entities tend to be, with a sarcastic glimmer in her eye that says, "Oh, I've seen things." You don't remember her name. Nobody really does. But she drifts over to the bronze shield Athena left behind, picks it up with a vine-wrapped hand, and angles it just right to catch her own reflection. Then she looks at you, then the flute, then back to her reflection. "Yikes," she whispers, mimicking Athena's puffed cheeks. The forest giggles with her. This is how the gossip spreads, not through scrolls or heralds, but via divine forest shade, both literal and metaphorical. The story of Athena's puffed-up flute face becomes woodland legend within hours. Satyrs cackle about it while playing their pipes too loud. Naiads reenact it beside sacred springs. You swear one dryad carved a crude doodle of it into a tree trunk. And as you wander toward that spring, curious, mildly chilled, but fully caught in the drift of this divine embarrassment, you hear whispers ripple through the reeds. They say that particular spring, a mirror-clear pool tucked behind a laurel grove, remembers faces. Mortal, divine, it doesn't care. Show your reflection there, and it'll show you how others see you. Not who you are, but the version that makes them wince a little. Athena's flute face, immortalized in that pool like a screenshotted meme. And because myths love symmetry, this is the very place she glimpsed herself while testing her invention. That's when she got mad. Not just regular, stubbed my toe on Olympus mad. Deep existential, why did I try something new mad? She didn't just toss the flute, she cursed it, whispered a divine oath that anyone who played it would be overcome by vanity, hubris, or both. Classic overcorrection. Historians still argue whether the curse was meant to protect the world from bad music or just preserve Athena's reputation. Either way, the flute didn't stay buried long. Back by the pool, you kneel and peer into the water. Sure enough, there's your own reflection. Slightly exaggerated. Your eyebrows are somehow angrier, your posture a touch slouchier, and your nose is suddenly more ambitious. You pull back quickly. The nymph chuckles from a nearby rock. "Don't worry," she says. "It makes everyone look like they haven't slept in 3 weeks." You wonder if anyone's ever asked her name. Probably not. Nymphs don't tend to get proper titles unless they seduce a god or die tragically. She doesn't seem bothered by it. She flicks a pebble into the water and watches the ripples ruin someone else's divine memory. Then, with an offhanded gesture, she points to a reed by the pool's edge. "Someone's going to play it again," she says. "They always do. Curiosity's louder than any curse." The wind picks up. A lazy breeze skims across the surface of the spring, making the reeds vibrate. Softly, but distinctly, a delicate note hums into existence. You're not sure if it's music or imagination. Probably both. And just like that, your senses adjust. The grove feels older now, quieter. The gossip is gone, replaced by a kind of drowsy hush, as if even the forest's ready for bed but still too nosy to fully sleep. You walk the edge of the pool and discover something odd, Marks in the dirt, hoof prints, not horse-sized, but cloven and deep, and they're leading toward the spot where the flute was dropped. You blink. That wasn't there earlier. The nymph raises one eyebrow. "Oh," she says. "He's here." You pause. "Who?" She just smirks, then fades into the shadows, leaving only the soft sound of breeze over water and the faint, unmistakable wail of a flute being tested for the first time by someone with hooves and questionable judgment. That's when it hits you. Athena's not going to be the last chapter of this story. No, she just opened the door. What follows will be louder, messier, and much more embarrassing, because someone else has found the flute, and he's about to think he's good at it. You follow the cloven tracks out of the grove, each one pressed firmly into the soft earth like a bad decision waiting to bloom. The air shifts as you walk, still sleepy, but now warmer, lazier, like a meadow after a wedding feast. There's music ahead, if you can call it that. A warbling, uneven melody floats through the trees, full of hiccups and dramatic pauses. It's what might happen if a kazoo had too much ambition. You crest a mossy hill and spot him. Marsyas. He's leaning against a tree trunk, head tilted back, eyes closed in the sort of ecstatic trance normally reserved for ancient prophets and people who think they invented brunch. His skin's sun-kissed, shaggy hair curling like ivy vines, and his legs. Yep, goat, full satyr mode. Hooves planted, tail twitching, one of those smug little satyr smiles plastered across his face, and in his hands, Athena's flute, held delicately, reverently, if a little backwards. He gives it another go, puffing out his cheeks like he's trying to impress a nymph across the meadow. The sound he makes is not bad, not good either, but loud, confident, and full of vibes. The birds in the nearby cypress tree vacate the premises with urgency. You try not to laugh, but Marsyas hears you anyway. He opens one eye and grins like he's been expecting an audience all along. "Pretty good, right?" he says, waggling his eyebrows. "Found it by a spring. Felt fated." Of course he did. Marsyas is the type of character who treats fate like a stage cue. Everything's a sign, a calling, a cosmic joke that he happens to be the punchline of, and he's totally fine with that. He explains, in between increasingly dramatic flute blasts, that the instrument was just lying there, practically asking to be played. You don't bother mentioning the curse, or Athena, or the divine wrath currently marinating in the background. Instead, you sit on a sun-warmed rock and let him talk. Here's the thing about Marsyas. He's charming. In the kind of way that makes you think maybe chaos won't follow him this time. He doesn't mean to stir things up. He just has vibes. Big, hoof-stomping, tavern-singing, overly confident satyr vibes. And he's ambitious. Dangerous for a satyr. Most of his kind are content with wine, revelry, and occasional poorly thought-out romantic overtures toward passing breezes. But Marsyas, he's got dreams. He wants respect, recognition, maybe even a statue. So naturally, the minute he finds a divine instrument tossed aside by a war goddess, he thinks, what if this is my big break? You try to gently suggest that maybe divine instruments come with strings attached. He waves you off. Pfft, gods abandon stuff all the time. Half of Olympus is just lost and found. You can't argue with that. There are whole myths about discarded weapons, orphaned curses, and enchanted doorknobs. Then he says it. The words that, in every myth, signal the descent into chaos. I bet I could outplay Apollo. You blink. A bird crashes into a branch overhead and quickly regrets being alive. Outplay Apollo, the god of music, poetry, plague, and questionable dating choices. The literal embodiment of beautiful performance. The one who probably has a divine Spotify playlist that updates with celestial precision. That Apollo. Marsyas, to his credit, doesn't seem scared. He paces, flute in hand, already imagining the contest. I mean, I've got soul, he says. He's all technique, cold, perfect, boring. You can't help it. You laugh. And here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. In ancient Phrygia, Marsyas's mythical homeland, wind instruments like the aulos were actually favoured in religious rites and celebrations. They symbolised ecstatic worship, emotion, frenzy, not the calm, golden control of Apollo's lyre. So in his cultural context, Marsyas wasn't entirely delusional. He was tapping into something real, something powerful. Still, Apollo? You start to warn him, but he's already rehearsing his opening number, complete with dramatic arm flares. The flute wheezes like it's trying to file a complaint with HR. And yet, it's not awful. There's something raw in the sound, unfiltered. You can feel it in your chest, not polished, but passionate. A different kind of music than Apollo's crisp perfection. A little ugly, a little brave. And here's the fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe Marsyas might have originally been a local Anatolian deity, a nature spirit demoted over time into a comic sidekick for moral tales. He didn't always start off as the butt of the myth. In some versions, he won the contest. But those are fringe. The canonical myth? It's marching straight toward a musical duel that ends poorly. You ask Marsyas, one last time, if he's sure. He grins. Absolutely. What's the worst that could happen? The grove goes quiet. Not in a peaceful way. In a somebody just triggered a plot device way. The sky darkens slightly. You swear you hear the faint twang of a lyre tuning itself somewhere far, far above. And Marsyas, he just toots one final note and starts practicing his bow. The meadow's breeze stills like it knows something you don't. Or rather, something Marsyas doesn't. You sit watching him practice dramatic entrances, pacing back and forth with the flute clenched between his goatish fingers, occasionally stopping to pose like a heroic fresco come to life. It would be funny if it weren't so inevitable. Then comes the shimmer, a golden ripple in the air like the sky has suddenly remembered it's divinely aesthetic. You squint upward, and there he is, Apollo, god of order, light, prophecy, reason and cheekbones, sharp enough to cut a pomegranate in half. He descends not so much like a god, but like an award presenter who's been waiting all night for someone to challenge his supremacy. Every step is soft and polished, his chariot hovering just behind him in the clouds, like it's holding his oat milk latte. Slung over his shoulder, the famous golden lyre, strings practically humming with anticipation, and the first thing he does, raise one perfect eyebrow at Marsyas. That's the challenger, Marsyas beams. Marsyas of Phrygia, satyr, musician, visionary. Apollo gives a small nod, the kind of polite expression you'd use for a toddler showing you their macaroni art. And then, because Greek myths cannot exist without spectacle, a small crowd materializes. Nymphs, muses, a few minor gods. You think you spot Dionysus, sipping something purple in the back. This isn't just a contest, it's a full-blown divine showdown. The flute versus the lyre, wildness versus refinement, chaos versus elegance. You settle into the grass, trying to look inconspicuous. You don't want to be collateral. Apollo, ever the showman, steps forward and plucks a string. The air ripples. You hear a sound that somehow evokes sunlight filtering through olive trees, the exact moment a breeze lifts your hair, the taste of ripe apricots. It's obnoxiously beautiful. A muse swoons off a nearby rock. Marsyas snorts. Sure, nice, if you like music that makes you feel like nothing bad has ever happened. Then he raises the flute and plays. It's raw, unsteady, but there's a heartbeat to it. You feel the ground thrum beneath you. It's the music of animals gathering at dusk, of shepherds calling over hills, of things that aren't perfect but are alive. The notes stumble in places, wobble, but never fall. You can tell, somewhere in that chaotic tune, there's a story, maybe even a soul. The gods shift. Someone coughs. Dionysus nods once solemnly. Apollo narrows his eyes. The duel begins. They alternate. Apollo with his impossibly graceful fingerwork, coaxing order and harmony from his lyre. Each note is like a marble column, clean and tall. Then Marsyas, with his haunting blasts, forcing the flute to wail and whisper in turn, evoking mountain storms, drunken dances, and dreams that crumble by morning. And then Marsyas makes a mistake. Not in the music, that's fine. Weird, but fine. He says casually between rounds, "Let's raise the stakes, play upside down." Apollo freezes. The crowd hushes. The muses lean in like theatre kids during a dramatic pause. See, Marsyas doesn't know what he's done. He thinks it's just a challenge. Turn your instrument, match me in form, not just in sound, but the lyre, with its open frame and plucked strings, can be played upside down. The flute? Not so much, especially when it's a double pipe that requires coordinated finger placement and breath control. It's like asking someone to tap dance while doing calculus backwards. Apollo smiles, but it's that quietly sinister kind of smile, the kind that says, "Sure, let's play your little game, and then I'll ruin your life with perfect lighting." Historians still argue whether this moment was divine trickery or sheer hubris on Marsyas' part. Some say the rule change was unfair. Others claim it was simply poetic justice, that Marsyas, in his ambition, stepped over a line he didn't even know existed. But back in the meadow, the contest continues. Apollo flips his lyre like it's made of air and begins to play, not just well, but transcendentally. The melody spirals through dimensions. You taste honey. You remember every compliment you've ever received. Somewhere, a baby goat is born and immediately starts pirouetting. Marsyas tries, he really does. He adjusts, contorts, flips the flute. But it's not built for this. His notes come out strangled, off-key. A couple of nymphs wince sympathetically. And Apollo? He doesn't stop. He builds and builds until the music is not just beautiful, it's humiliating. Then silence. Marsyas lowers the flute. His face, still defiant but now tinged with panic, searches the crowd for someone, anyone who might say, "Well, it's subjective." No one does. Even Dionysus takes a polite sip and looks away. And then Apollo steps forward. You see it in his eyes. Something mean. Not theatrical, not performative, just cold. Because here's the twist. Apollo hates being challenged. He's the god of order, yes, but also of revenge. Ask Cassandra. Ask Niobe. He doesn't forgive humiliation, and Marsyas has made him sweat, even just a little. So the punishment comes, and it's not musical. Now, we'll spare you the explicit mythological ending, but let's just say it involves flaying. Yes, that kind. Apollo decides Marsyas should be made an example of, his skin strung up in a cave for all to see. A warning against artistic overconfidence. You look away. So does most of the audience. But here's your historical fact. In ancient Phrygia, there really was a shrine to Marsyas, and people believed a river near it wept in mourning for him. His myth lingered, not as a punchline, but as a kind of tragic warning. A tale of passion meeting perfection and being burned for it. The crowd disperses slowly like dream fragments at sunrise. Apollo strides away, lyre gleaming, already humming something new, and you're left with the flute, blood-specked, cracked but still whispering. A soft breeze picks up, and you swear it plays a note all on its own. You walk the river path in silence, the world hushed as if the trees themselves are holding their breath. No bird song, no wind through the leaves, just the trickle of water and the weight of what you just witnessed. The air smells faintly of copper and cypress. It clings to your skin like mythic residue. The satyr is gone, but the story refuses to leave. You follow the trail of the river, the Marsyas they're calling it now, a small, twisting body of water winding through the Anatolian foothills, named for the satyr who thought he could take on a god. It burbles gently over smooth stones, its waters oddly clear, almost too clean, as if still scrubbing the memory of Apollo's punishment from its soul. You crouch beside it and dip your fingers in. It's cold, sharper than you'd expect for a midsummer stream. As your fingertips break the surface, the current tugs gently, as if trying to pull you somewhere, or show you something. And here's the weird part. The river cries. Not metaphorically, not poetically, it weeps. That's what people say. The locals still whisper that in spring, when the snowmelt swells the banks, you can hear a sorrowful note echoing through the valley, a low, flute-like moan that rises with the fog and vanishes by midday. Some say it's Marsyas still playing, trying to prove he was right. Others think it's just the sound of regret, trapped in water. One particularly speculative historian once suggested the area's natural acoustics might cause certain wind patterns to mimic musical tones. Another said, rather plainly, it's probably just frogs. Historians still argue whether the river's voice is a divine echo or just geological coincidence. But standing there, alone, feet pressed into the riverbank, you can't help but feel like the water knows. The locals built a shrine here once, carved into the rock face beside the stream. It's half collapsed now, moss-covered and forgotten by tourists, but it's still sacred in that quiet, broken way. A place you stumble on when you're not looking for anything, and somehow leave feeling changed. There's a carving near the altar. It's crude, probably post-Apollonian, but it shows a figure with pipes, hooves, and raised arms. Not in defiance, but in offering. Above him, a lyre. Below, a wave. And here's your fringe tidbit for the section. In some local traditions, Marsyas wasn't seen as a fool or a victim, but a teacher, a bearer of passion, sacrifice, and sound. Some early musical schools, particularly those emphasizing wind instruments, claimed their lineage traced back to him, not Apollo. Wild, right? Goat man as musical godfather. You move upstream, following the bend. The water grows thinner, whispering more than it flows, until finally it reaches a narrow, reed-choked marsh. It smells of wet earth and ancient secrets. Here, the ground is soft, squishy, and oddly warm. Reeds taller than a man sway gently despite the lack of breeze. You spot it almost by accident, tucked between two rocks half submerged and tangled with roots. Another Orlos. Not Athena's, not Marsyas's. Something newer, or maybe older. Who knows? Time is weird around myth. You pick it up. It's surprisingly intact, weathered but playable. You raise it, half curious, and blow. The sound that comes out is wrong. Not off-key, not broken, just deeply unsettling, like a memory of something that never happened. A lullaby hummed in a nightmare. You drop it quickly, heart racing, and the sound cuts off like a blade. The reeds behind you sway suddenly. You turn. Nothing. But the air is thicker now, heavier. The river has grown quieter. You step back, watching the current twist around your ankles. It feels less like water and more like thought. Something ancient, unresolved, pulsing beneath the surface. Not angry, not mournful, just tired. You get the sense that Marsyas isn't gone. Not really. His story just sank into the soil, seeped into the springs and turned into something more permanent, something half forgotten, like a song you can't quite remember but hum anyway. The flute in the marsh shifts on its own, knocked slightly by the current, and gives one last mournful note. You don't touch it again. Instead, you walk back downstream, shoes squelching, river murmuring. The sky is darker now, a velvet dusk settling over the hills. Crickets start up like an orchestra tuning slowly, one tiny note at a time. You pass the shrine again, and this time you bow, not out of fear or obligation, but respect. Because whether Marsyas was foolish or brave, reckless or visionary, he tried. And that counts for something, especially in a world where the gods rarely lose, and mortals rarely try to make them. The stars are out now, flickering, pale, almost sheepish in their glow. You walk further from the river, the hills opening into a wide field swaying with tall grasses and half-blooming wildflowers, the kind of place that looks painted like some sleepy painter god fell asleep mid-brush stroke. The air smells like chamomile and rain that never comes, and that's when you start to hear them, the echoes, not voices exactly, not music either, something between the two. A distant, whispery sound carried by the wind circling just out of reach. If you strain, you think you can make out a note, maybe two. Then it's gone, swallowed back into the reeds. This is the place the stories say the wind carries memory, that the field remembers, not just events, but emotion, regret, shame, longing. They settle into the soil, grow like vines beneath the earth. You spot another instrument growing out of the reeds. Yes, growing. Reeds twisted by time and myth, curled into a new kind of flute, organic, uneven. Like the land itself tried to recreate the sound of Marsyas, and failed just slightly. The result is beautiful in that haunting, slightly unsettling way. You're not sure whether to play it or just bow and move on. You do neither. Instead, you sit, right in the middle of the field, cross-legged, letting the grass tickle your ankles. The stars blink overhead. It's quiet, but not the kind of quiet that's empty. The kind that waits, and then the wind shifts. A sound rises from the soil itself. Faint at first, like someone exhaling through a hollow bone. Then it builds, slow, echoing, rising like a chant. There's no rhythm, no melody, just sound and sadness wrapping around you like a foggy lullaby. Some say these fields were once a site of mourning, that after Marsyas was punished, his followers, fellow satyrs, woodland spirits, maybe even the odd sentimental nymph, gathered here to grieve. They didn't build a monument, didn't start a cult. They played. They picked up whatever pieces were left, bones, reeds, shells, and played until the sky dimmed and the air remembered. Here's your historical nugget. In ancient rituals, especially those tied to fertility and wild nature gods, music played a vital role in communal grief. Instruments like flutes and panpipes were used to express what words couldn't. Loss, yearning, devotion. Archaeologists have even found primitive wind instruments buried in graves, placed there to help souls communicate through the veil. This place, it seems, remembers that practice. And the fringe tidbit, some old, discredited source, written on crumbling papyrus and mostly ignored, claims that these fields are where music first turned into prayer, that before temples and hymns there was only this, a lonely field, a broken sound, and the hope that someone, somewhere, was listening. You lie back in the grass, eyes full of stars. The wind plays the reeds like a lazy orchestra. No composer, no conductor, just echoes, and the echoes aren't always consistent. One moment, it's a soft lullaby. The next, it's discordant. 2 or 3 flutes playing different tunes at once. Jarring, slightly chaotic, like grief can't make up its mind, like even memory struggles to agree on what happened. That's the thing about myths. They change. You remember the story as you were told it. Apollo wins, Marsyas loses, end of tale. But then you hear it again in the wind, a different version. In this one, Marsyas doesn't challenge Apollo. Apollo challenges him. He hears the music, grows envious of its wildness, and demands a contest. And when he loses, because in this telling he does lose, he rewrites the story, turns Marsyas into a cautionary tale. Historians still argue whether that alternate myth existed or was just a product of later reinterpretation. But the field doesn't care about academic consensus. It holds both versions, all versions, because what matters isn't what's true, it's what gets remembered. And this place remembers everything. The soil beneath you vibrates slightly. Not enough to frighten, just enough to remind you. Something happened here. Something divine. Something petty. Something important. You drift, caught between wake and sleep, and the wind gives you fragments. A voice saying, "It's not about perfection." Another, quieter, "He played what he felt." And finally, so faint you almost miss it, "Play it again." You sit up. The reed flute is still beside you. Its edges glow faintly under starlight. You pick it up, blow a single note, and the field responds. Not loudly, not obviously, but something shifts. The grass stills, the wind listens, and for one brief moment, you are part of the myth. Your hands are still warm from the reed flute when the wind pulls you east, toward a rocky rise just beyond the whispering field. The grass gives way to cracked stone and gnarled olive trees, their trunks twisted like ancient spines, bark scarred by time and lightning. The path narrows as you climb, and soon the slope sharpens beneath your feet. In the distance, faint torchlight flickers like forgotten stars. You're walking toward a city, or, more accurately, the city, Athens. But not the Athens you know from textbooks and postcard ruins. No, this is the version still breathing, still half-built. The marble is young, the temple still ringing with the clinks of chisels and prayers. You can hear voices arguing about columns and taxes. Somewhere a potter is cursing at his kiln. An owl flaps overhead, unbothered. And at the heart of it all, Athena. She stands at the base of her new temple on the Acropolis, arms folded, helmet tucked under one elbow, surveying the chaos of urban planning with a look of barely contained judgment. You hang back, not sure if you're supposed to be here, or if she even remembers her flute incident. Spoiler? She does. You catch a flash of irritation in her eyes as her gaze sweeps over the scaffolding. You'd think the goddess of wisdom would enjoy watching a city rise in her name, but she looks distracted, restless, like she's trying very hard not to remember the sound of a flute in a fig grove. You glance around. The city is her temple now. She's traded melodies for monuments, rhythm for architecture. Athena's chosen to rebuild herself in stone. Literally. Here's your historical fact. The Parthenon, which will eventually crown this hill, is not just a temple. It's a statement. A war memorial, treasury, church, mosque, museum, and, more than anything, a myth made solid. Its friezes and statues tell stories. Her stories. But if you look closely, the aulos isn't one of them. Athena has erased it. You watch as workers hoist a massive marble statue into place. It's her. Of course it is. 10 times taller, spear in hand, gaze eternal. Behind her, the olive tree she supposedly gifted to the city stands stubbornly crooked. It's not a grand gesture. It's just practical. Food, oil, shade. Classic Athena. Useful over flashy. That's how she won this city, remember? Historians still argue whether the contest between Poseidon and Athena for Athens' patronage ever actually happened, or was just later myth-making. But the story's too good to let go. Poseidon strikes the ground and offers a saltwater spring, or a horse, depending on which version you like. Athena, calm and strategic, plants an olive tree. The people choose her. Low-key flex, right? And yet, you can't help but notice how pointed her victories have become. Olive trees, statues, temples. Everything she gives now is permanent, unmoving, as if she's trying to prove she doesn't need the ephemeral anymore, as if a flute never existed. But art remembers what marble forgets. You round a corner and stumble into a smaller plaza, tucked behind the bustle. It's quiet here, older, less polished. A mosaic runs across the ground, faded, cracked, but unmistakable. A satyr, a flute, a goddess turning away. Someone tried to preserve the moment, not as a warning, not as mockery, just as a truth. There's a woman kneeling beside it, brushing dust from the tiles. A sculptor, maybe. She hums softly as she works. The tune, familiar, raw, reedy. You freeze. She looks up. You hear it too, she asks. You nod. She smiles. It's everywhere if you listen. You sit beside her. She tells you stories, quiet ones, about failed statues, lost paintings, songs no one sings anymore. Each one forgotten by history, but still lingering, like a scent caught in a winter coat. She says Athena still mourns the flute, whether she admits it or not. Why else make so many statues of herself, she asks, running a hand over the mosaic. She's trying to freeze the version she can live with. And here's your fringe tidbit. There's a theory, deep in the folds of obscure archaeological journals, that Athena's distaste for the flute had less to do with vanity and more to do with what the instrument represented. Vulnerability, breath, emotion. Something she, as a symbol of statecraft and control, couldn't afford to embrace. You look out over the city. Fires flicker in braziers. Songs drift from distant taverns. The Parthenon looms above it all, perfect and still. But the heartbeat of Athens isn't in the stone. It's in the alleys, the mosaics, the whispered tunes beneath the scaffolding, and in Athena's quiet moments, when the workers have gone, when the statues cast long shadows in moonlight, you can still catch her staring out at the olive grove she once played in, her face unreadable. Maybe she's remembering, maybe she's listening. Athens at night has its own pulse, quieter than the marble grandeur up top. People whisper stories in these alleys. Some are epics, some are gossip, and some sound a lot like revenge. You're not sure how you find her, or maybe she finds you. She's seated at a loom in a narrow courtyard behind a row of terracotta homes. The moonlight catches the threads, making them shimmer like spider silk. She's fast, unnaturally so. Her fingers blur as they pass over the warp and weft, creating images in thread that feel too real for a loom to contain. Arachne. You don't need her to introduce herself. The air around her practically hums with tension, part pride, part tragedy, all wrapped up in the click-clack of her weaving. Here comes the callback. Remember Athena's issue with artistry? Yeah, that didn't stop with flutes. It carried right into tapestry. And Arachne. She was the wrong mortal with the right talent. She doesn't look up as you approach, just keeps weaving. But her voice carries easily in the night air. She couldn't stand it, she murmurs, that I was better. The cloth on the loom is stunning, a tapestry mid-birth, golden and wine-red threads interlacing to depict gods. Not flattering versions either. Zeus as a bull tricking Europa, Apollo chasing Daphne, Dionysus, thoroughly intoxicated, falling off a lion. The full, scandalous highlight reel of divine nonsense. You realise quickly, this is not a tribute, it's a roast. Arachne glances at you, just once. I wove the truth. And that's the whole problem, isn't it? Athena, queen of craft, patron of the loom, could handle being surpassed in technique. Maybe. But when Arachne chose to depict the gods as flawed, indulgent, and deeply messy, that crossed a line. Not artistic, not aesthetic, political. Historians still argue whether the story of Arachne was invented by moralists to teach humility, or whether it reflects a deeper cultural tension between divine myth and the unsettling honesty of human creativity. Either way, Arachne's thread became a trap. Did she really turn you into a spider, you ask, voice barely above a whisper. Arachne shrugs. She gave me what I deserved, or what she needed me to become. It's vague. It always is. But you notice now, her fingers move differently. Not quite human. Too many joints? Too much silence between motions? You blink, and it's gone. She just looks tired, furious, focused. You sit beside her watching the tapestry grow. She's not trying to escape the myth. She's working inside it, rewriting it from the inside out, one thread at a time. This isn't punishment anymore. It's a form of resistance. And here's your mainstream historical fact. In ancient Greece, weaving was more than just domestic labour. It was a revered art form, women's primary medium of expression. They couldn't vote, couldn't speak at assemblies, but they could thread truth into cloth. Some scholars think many anonymous tapestries told dissenting stories long before historians dared write them down. You glance at Arachne's work again. In the far corner of the tapestry, half hidden by shadow thread, is a figure you recognise. Athena, crouched by a tree, playing the aulos, her cheeks puffed out, eyes defiant, the moment she'd rather erase. You laugh quietly. Arachne smirks. She hates when I add that. The tapestry isn't just about gods behaving badly. It's a memory board, a rebuttal. She's kept that moment alive, not out of cruelty, but because it matters. Because when a goddess disowns her own creation, someone has to remember it happened. You wonder aloud if Athena still visits. Arachne nods. She came last week, didn't say anything, just stood there, watched, then left. You shiver, not from fear, but from the weight of that image. The goddess and the weaver, bound by thread, history, and mutual, exhausted disappointment. Here's a fringe theory you may like. Some folklorists believe spiders became symbols of both punishment and persistence because of Arachne. That every web is a quiet act of rebellion, a soft monument to someone who refused to be edited out of myth. A breeze picks up. The loom creaks. Arachne ties off a section of the tapestry and begins another, the shuttle clicking like a clock counting towards some unseen resolution. You stay for a while, not talking, just listening to the thread. And as you leave, you realise something else. Athena's legacy isn't carved in stone or sung in temples. It's stitched, often behind her back, into cloth, into reeds, into memory. And it never ever stays quiet for long.